Commander Zix stared at the glowing screen in front of him. The blue and green planet called Earth spun slowly on his display. Numbers and data filled the sides of the screen. All of them said the same thing. This world was not dangerous. The file showed a threat level of 2.1 out of 10. Most empty rocks in space got a higher rating. The creatures living on this planet called themselves humans. They seemed weak and divided. Their ships could barely leave their own world. They still used old chemical rockets that moved slower than a lazy space slug. Zix laughed to himself. These humans spent most of their time fighting each other, wars over land, water, and ideas that made no sense. Their governments could not agree on anything. Some humans did not even believe their own planet was getting warmer. How could such a broken species pose any threat to the mighty Karathi Empire? The empire had been growing for 300 years. They owned 47 star systems now. Most worlds joined them willingly after seeing their massive war fleets. The few that refused learned quickly why resistance was pointless. The Karathi way was simple. Join us, or we will make you join us. Zix typed a message to Fleet Admiral Nexus. The message was short and clear. Earth would be an easy target. 3 heavy cruisers should be enough to scare the humans into giving up. Maybe they would not even need to fire their weapons. Just showing up in orbit usually did the trick. On the other side of the galaxy, on the blue planet itself, Dr. Lisa Martinez was having a very different kind of day. She worked at a place called the Deep Space Monitoring Station. It sat in the middle of a desert in Nevada. The building looked small and boring from outside. Inside, it held some of the most powerful listening equipment on Earth. Lisa had been watching the screens for 6 hours straight. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago. Her eyes hurt from staring at the green dots and lines that showed what was happening in deep space. Most days were quiet. Space was big and empty, and nothing interesting happened. But today was different. 3 large objects had appeared at the edge of the solar system. They were big, much bigger than anything humans had ever built. They were also slowing down from speeds that should not be possible. Nothing could move that fast and then stop so quickly. Nothing that humans knew about anyway. Lisa grabbed her phone and called General Pete Harrison at NORAD. NORAD was the place that watched the skies for threats to Earth. They had been doing it for many years, but they had always been looking for missiles and bombs from other humans. They had never expected visitors from other stars. The phone rang twice before Harrison answered. His voice was calm, but Lisa could hear the tension underneath. Everyone who worked in these jobs knew this day might come. They had plans for it. They had trained for it. But knowing something might happen and having it actually happen were very different things. Lisa gave her report quickly and clearly. 3 unknown vessels, moving at impossible speeds, coming from deep space toward Earth. Expected arrival time was less than 48 hours. Harrison listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked only one question. Was she absolutely sure about the size reading? She was sure. These ships were huge. Each one was larger than the biggest aircraft carrier ever built. They were not trying to hide. They were not being sneaky. They were coming straight toward Earth like they owned the place. Harrison thanked her and hung up. Within minutes, phones were ringing in secret buildings all over the world. People who had spent their whole careers preparing for this moment were suddenly very busy. The first contact protocols were being activated for the first time in human history. High above Earth, Captain Jake Sullivan was fixing a broken antenna on the International Space Station when his radio crackled to life. The voice from ground. Control sounded different than usual. More serious, more urgent. They told him to stop what he was doing and report to the command module immediately. Jake pushed himself through the narrow tunnels of the space station. Floating in zero gravity was second nature to him now. He had been in space for 3 months. The station was his home and his workplace. It was also about to become something much more important. In the command module, he found pilot Amy Rodriguez and systems specialist Ben Carter staring at a secure communication screen. The message displayed there was short, but it changed everything. Unknown vessels approaching Earth. Maintain radio silence. Observe and report. Prepare for extended mission duration. Jake read the message twice to make sure he understood it correctly. Extended mission duration meant they might not be going home on schedule. Radio silence meant they could not talk to their families. Observe and report meant they were now humanity's eyes and ears in space during the most important moment in human history. The three crew members looked at each other in silence. They all understood what this meant. Earth was about to meet its neighbors. Whether those neighbors came in peace or with other intentions remained to be seen. But whatever happened next, they would have a front row seat to watch it unfold. Back in the Nevada desert, Dr. Martinez was running new calculations on her computer. The alien ships were slowing down much earlier than they needed to. If they wanted to reach Earth orbit, they could have kept their incredible speed for much longer. Either these aliens were very careful, or they were very experienced at this kind of thing. She thought about all the science fiction movies she had watched as a child. In those movies, the aliens usually wanted to destroy Earth or take it over. Sometimes they wanted to study humans like insects in a jar. Very rarely did they come in peace and want to be friends. But movies were just stories. This was real life. And in real life, Dr. Martinez was starting to realize that Earth's visitors might not know as much about humans as they thought they did. The galaxy might have labeled Earth as a low-threat world, but the galaxy had never met anyone quite like humans before. As the alien ships continued their approach toward Earth, neither side fully understood what they were about to encounter. The Karathi expected an easy conquest. The humans expected to be outmatched and overwhelmed. Both sides were about to learn something new about the universe and about themselves. The three Karathi ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Admiral Nexus stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the small blue world ahead of them. It looked peaceful and harmless, spinning. In the darkness of space, Admiral Nexus had done this many times before. He had visited dozens of worlds and made them part of the Empire. The process was always the same. Arrive with overwhelming force, make demands, accept surrender. Add another world to the Empire's growing collection. He opened a communication channel and began broadcasting to Earth. His message was simple and direct. The humans would submit to Karathi rule or face the consequences. They had 24 hours to decide. This was more time than he usually gave to primitive species, but he was feeling generous today. The response came back faster than he expected. A calm female voice spoke in clear galactic standard language. She introduced herself as Secretary of State Helen Brooks. She thanked the Admiral for making contact and invited him to formal negotiations. She suggested they meet at a neutral location in space to discuss terms. Admiral Nexus was surprised. Most species either panicked or immediately surrendered when faced with Karathi warships. These humans seemed almost like they had been expecting this conversation. It was unusual but not alarming. Some species tried to negotiate before giving up. It never changed the final outcome. The humans proposed meeting aboard a small space station they said they could build specifically for the negotiations. Admiral Nexus looked at the technical specifications they transmitted. The station would be simple and small, clearly assembled from basic industrial parts. It would pose no threat to his ships. He agreed to the meeting. It would be amusing to see what these primitive creatures thought they could negotiate. He would bring minimal security forces. After all, what could humans possibly do to threaten the most powerful military in the galaxy? What Admiral Nexus did not know was that the space station was being designed by Dr. Rachel Kim. She had spent 15 years working on nuclear reactors before switching to aerospace engineering. She understood how to build things that looked simple on the outside, but had hidden capabilities within. Dr. Kim worked closely with Colonel Steve Murphy during the design process. Murphy had spent 30 years in the military, studying how small forces could defeat larger ones. He knew that the best weapons were often the ones that did not look like weapons at all. The space station took shape quickly in Earth's orbit. To outside observers, it appeared to be exactly what the humans had described. A basic meeting facility assembled from standard components. The Karathi scanners showed nothing unusual about its construction or power systems. But every piece had been chosen very carefully. The power generators could produce 3 times more energy than needed for life support and lights. The structural supports were stronger than required for a temporary facility. The communication arrays could do much more than just transmit conversations. Secretary. Brooks arrived at the station with a small diplomatic team. She was accompanied by General Nancy Price, who served as military advisor. Both women had been chosen not just for their skills but for their ability to think quickly under pressure and ask the right questions at the right time. Admiral Nexus docked his shuttle with the station and came aboard with 2 guards. The meeting room was plain and functional. Human furniture looked uncomfortable, but the atmosphere was breathable. Everything seemed exactly as primitive as he had expected. The negotiations began with formal pleasantries. Secretary Brooks welcomed the Admiral to human space and expressed interest in peaceful relations with the Karathi Empire. She acknowledged that the Empire had superior technology and military power. She seemed reasonable and intelligent for a member of such a backward species. Admiral Nexus presented the standard terms. Earth would become a tributary world of the Empire. Humans would provide resources and labor as required. In return, the Empire would provide protection and allow limited self-governance. It was a generous offer compared to what some conquered worlds received. But as the talks continued, Admiral Nexus began to notice something odd. The humans asked very specific questions about Karathi ship designs. They wanted to know about military protocols and supply lines. They asked how the Empire maintained control over such vast distances. When Admiral Nexus questioned why they needed such detailed information, Secretary Brooks smiled politely. She explained that humans were naturally curious creatures. They wanted to understand how their new galactic neighbors operated. She made it sound like innocent scientific interest. The Admiral found this almost charming. Many primitive species were curious about advanced technology. It was normal for them to ask questions they could not possibly understand the answers to. He was happy to share basic information about Karathi superiority. What he did not realize was that every question had been carefully planned. Back on Earth, General Harrison was coordinating with a team of analysts led by Dr. Chris Johnson. Johnson had spent 20 years at the Pentagon studying military strategy. He knew how to gather intelligence through seemingly innocent conversation. Every answer Admiral Nexus gave was immediately analyzed. His casual comments about ship capabilities were run through computer models. His descriptions of Empire logistics were compared to human military doctrine. Patterns began to emerge that the Admiral never intended to reveal. The negotiations stretched on for hours. Admiral Nexus was patient because he believed the outcome was inevitable. These humans would eventually accept reality and submit to Empire rule. Their questions and delays were just the natural behavior of a species trying to adjust to their new situation. Secretary Brooks and General Price took careful notes during every session. They asked for breaks to consult with their government. During these breaks, they transmitted everything they had learned back to Earth. The information was processed by teams of experts who had been preparing for this moment their entire careers. Dr. Martinez continued monitoring the Karathi ships from her station in Nevada. She noticed that the aliens had positioned additional vessels throughout the outer solar system. They were not just here for negotiations. They were prepared for battle if the talks failed. This intelligence reached General Harrison within minutes. He immediately activated protocols that had been developed years earlier by Strategic Planning Director Maria Santos. Across Earth, seemingly, routine activities began taking on new purposes. Scientific missions were quietly redirected. Satellites changed their orbits. Deep space monitoring equipment started tracking very specific targets. On the Moon, engineer Paul Roberts received new orders for the mining operation he supervised. They needed to extract certain materials with unusual urgency. The official reason was a rush order for a new communications satellite. The real reason was classified at the highest levels. Admiral Nexus remained confident that these primitive humans would eventually see reason. Their questions showed intelligence, but not wisdom. Intelligence without wisdom was common among younger species. They asked good questions but lacked the experience to understand what the answers really meant. As the second day of negotiations began, Admiral Nexus decided it was time to speed up the process. He had been patient with these humans and their endless curiosity. But patience had limits. It was time to demonstrate why resistance to the Karathi Empire was pointless. He prepared to show these primitive creatures what real power looked like. He had no idea that the humans had been preparing to show him something as well. Admiral Nexus was getting tired of waiting. The humans had been asking questions for 2 days straight. Their curiosity was amusing at first, but now it was becoming annoying. These primitive creatures needed to understand their place in the galaxy. He decided to send a message to his fleet commanders. It was time to show the humans what Karathi power looked like. A small demonstration would help them make the right decision. Fear was often the best teacher for stubborn species. But as Admiral Nexus prepared his show of force, he began noticing things that bothered him. The humans seemed too calm for a species facing conquest. Most creatures showed fear or anger when confronted with superior military power. These humans just kept asking their endless questions with polite smiles. Captain Rodriguez was floating near the communications console aboard the International Space Station when she heard something interesting. Her equipment had been modified to pick up a wider range of signals than usual. The modification had been done quietly by technicians who claimed it was for better space weather monitoring. The signal she intercepted was not meant for human ears. It was a short burst transmission between Karathi ships using their military frequencies. Rodriguez could not understand the alien language, but she recorded everything. Within minutes, the recording was being transmitted to Earth, using a secure channel that most people did not know existed. On Earth, the recording reached Dr. Alex Thompson at a government facility that officially did not exist. Thompson was one of only 12 humans who specialized in xenolinguistics. She had spent her career studying how alien languages might work, even though no aliens had ever been found. Until now. Thompson worked for 18 hours straight, analyzing the Karathi transmission. The language was complex but followed patterns she had theorized about for years. Slowly, she began to understand what the aliens were saying to each other. What she learned made her immediately call General Harrison. The Karathi had more ships than they had admitted. Much more. Hidden throughout the outer solar system were additional fleets waiting for orders. The transmission Rodriguez had intercepted was a status report. The aliens were not just here for negotiations. They were prepared for a full military occupation of Earth. General Harrison received this news while sitting in a bunker 300 feet underground. The facility was officially a communications center for civilian emergency services. In reality, it was the command center for operations that did not appear in any public budget. Harrison immediately activated protocols that had been developed by Strategic Planning Director Maria Santos over the course of 15 years. Santos had studied every historical example of technologically inferior forces defeating superior ones. She had written plans that most people thought were science fiction. Today, those plans became operational reality. Across Earth, things that looked normal began serving very different purposes. The Deep Space Telescope Array in Chile started tracking Karathi ship movements with precision that surprised even its operators. Commercial satellites quietly changed their orbits to create a surveillance network that covered the entire solar system. Dr. Martinez at the monitoring station in Nevada found herself coordinating with observatories she had never heard of. Her official job was tracking asteroids and space debris. Her real job, which she was only now learning about, was much more important. She was part of a network that had been watching space for threats for much longer than most people knew. On the moon, engineer Paul Roberts was working overtime with his mining crew. They had been told the rush job was for a new communications project. The truth was more complicated. They were extracting specific metals and rare earth elements that had been stockpiled in locations throughout the solar system over the past 20 years. Roberts did not know why these materials were needed so urgently. He only knew that unmarked ships were arriving every few hours to collect what his team produced. The ships looked like standard cargo haulers, but they moved with the precision of military vessels. Dr. Kim's analysis of the Karathi ships was revealing critical information. Working with intelligence gathered during the negotiations, she had identified potential weaknesses in alien technology. The most important discovery was about their faster-than-light drives. The Karathi ships used a system that manipulated gravitational fields to travel between stars. The system was incredibly advanced, but it had one significant limitation. It required very precise calculations about local gravitational conditions. Any unexpected changes in gravity could disrupt or damage the drive systems. This information reached Dr. Martinez within hours of Kim's discovery. Martinez began coordinating with facilities around the world that could create localized gravitational anomalies. Most people thought such technology was purely theoretical. They were wrong. Meanwhile, Admiral Nexus was growing impatient with the slow progress of negotiations. Secretary Brooks and General Price continued asking detailed questions about everything, from Karathi culture to military logistics. Their curiosity seemed endless and their note-taking was obsessive. The Admiral decided it was time to end this charade. He would demonstrate Karathi power by targeting one of Earth's major cities with a minor orbital bombardment. Not enough to cause serious damage, just enough to show these primitives what they were dealing with. After seeing their cities threatened, the humans would surely become more cooperative. He chose New York City as his target. The city was large and important, but not a government center. The blast would be visible from space, but would only destroy a few city blocks. It would send the right message without causing unnecessary casualties. The Admiral considered himself a reasonable leader who preferred to avoid excessive violence. What Admiral Nexus did not know was that his communications were being monitored by systems he could not detect. Every order he gave to his fleet was intercepted and analyzed within minutes. The humans knew about his planned demonstration before his own gun crews received their targeting data. The information reached General Harrison at the same time it reached Admiral Nexus's weapons officer. Harrison had been expecting this moment. The aliens had followed the same pattern on 47 other worlds. First negotiations, then a demonstration of power, then surrender or conquest. But Earth was not like the other worlds the Karathi had conquered. Humans had been preparing for this possibility longer than anyone realized. The preparations had been hidden in plain sight, disguised as civilian projects and scientific research. Now it was time to show the galaxy that some species could not be intimidated. Harrison activated the final phase of humanity's first contact protocols. Across the solar system, equipment that had been waiting for years came online. Satellites that looked like communication relays revealed their true purpose. Deep space probes that appeared to be exploring asteroids began transmitting new kinds of signals. Admiral Nexus prepared to fire on New York City. He expected to see primitive humans running in terror from his demonstration of superior firepower. Instead, he was about to discover why Earth's threat rating was the greatest intelligence failure in galactic history. The humans were about to show the Karathi Empire what happened when you threatened a species that had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, world wars, and their own nuclear weapons. They were about to learn why some species earned their place in the galaxy, rather than being given it. Admiral Nexus gave the order to fire on New York City. His weapons officer confirmed the target and charged the main energy cannon. The beam would strike in exactly 30 seconds. It would destroy several city blocks and send a clear message to the human government about Karathi power. The energy beam lanced down from orbit toward the largest city on Earth. Admiral Nexus watched his targeting display and waited to see the explosion that would end human resistance. Instead, something impossible happened. The beam curved away from the city and disappeared harmlessly into space. The Admiral stared at his displays, in confusion. Energy beams did not change direction. They traveled in straight lines according to basic physics. Yet somehow the humans had deflected a weapon that could level mountains. It was not possible with primitive technology. What Admiral Nexus did not know was that Dr. Martinez had been coordinating with facilities around the world for the past 6 hours. Using a network of satellites that appeared to be communication relays, she had created a localized gravitational field that bent space itself. The energy beam had followed the curve of twisted spacetime away from Earth. The gravitational lens effect had been theoretical until 3 years ago. Dr. Tony Garcia had made it practical while working on what everyone thought was a new type of radio telescope. The project had been funded by a civilian science foundation that asked very few questions about technical details. Admiral Nexus tried to process what had just happened. The humans had defensive technology that his sensors could not detect. They had made his most powerful weapon useless without firing a single shot in return. This changed everything about the tactical situation. Before he could adjust his strategy, his communications officer reported a problem. Contact had been lost with the patrol ships positioned throughout the outer solar system. All three vessels had gone silent within minutes of each other. This was not a coincidence. Captain Sullivan had been preparing for this moment since receiving his extended mission orders. The International Space Station had been joined by a small fleet of ships that officially did not exist. They looked like civilian rescue vessels and emergency response craft. In reality, they were something much more dangerous. The rescue ships had been converted by teams working in facilities hidden inside normal-looking industrial complexes. Former Navy strategist Commander Rita Walsh had designed the modifications based on tactics that would have been familiar to submarine commanders from a century earlier. The human ships approached the Karathi patrol vessels while broadcasting civilian distress calls. They claimed to be miners and researchers who had been caught off guard by the alien arrival. They requested assistance and safe passage back to Earth. Their signals seemed desperate and harmless. The Karathi patrol commanders were confident in their technological superiority. These primitive human ships posed no threat to advanced alien warships. They allowed the rescue vessels to approach without conducting detailed scans. It was a mistake they would not live to regret. The civilian ships opened fire at point-blank range with weapons that should not have existed. The guns were built from mining equipment and industrial fabricators. They fired projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds, using electromagnetic fields originally designed for moving ore through processing facilities. The improvised weapons punched through Karathi's shields and armor like they were made of paper. The alien patrol ships were destroyed before they could send a warning or return fire. Within minutes, Admiral Nexus had lost contact with his outer system forces. On Earth, the successful defense of New York City triggered the activation of Operation Deep Strike. General Price coordinated the response from her command center while Colonel Murphy executed tactics that had been developed over 20 years of planning for exactly this scenario. What the Karathi did not know was that humans had been launching seemingly innocent scientific probes throughout the solar system. For decades, every deep space mission, every asteroid survey, every failed experiment had actually been placing weapons platforms in carefully calculated positions. The probes had been disguised as research equipment, studying solar radiation, magnetic fields, and space debris. Their real purpose was to serve as kinetic weapon platforms that could strike targets anywhere in the solar system. They had been waiting in the dark for years, invisible and patient. Admiral Nexus watched in growing alarm as his remaining ships began taking damage from projectiles that seemed to come from empty space. The attacks were precisely coordinated and devastatingly effective. His vessels were being hit by chunks of metal moving at speeds that turned them into weapons of incredible power. The projectiles were pieces of asteroids and space debris that had been accelerated using gravitational slingshot maneuvers around planets and moons. The technique required perfect timing and navigation, but used no advanced technology. It was simply good physics applied with deadly precision. Each impact sent shockwaves through the Karathi fleet. These were not energy weapons or exotic technologies. They were rocks and metal moving very fast, but they were destroying ships that had conquered 47 star systems. The psychological impact was almost as devastating as the physical damage. Admiral Nexus realized that Earth's primitive space program had been an elaborate deception. Every satellite launch, every deep space mission, every publicity announcement about scientific discovery had been cover for military preparation. The humans had been planning for galactic contact for much longer than anyone suspected. The species that could not agree on climate change had somehow agreed on preparing for alien invasion. The governments that fought over resources had coordinated a defense network spanning the entire solar system. The primitive creatures who still used chemical rockets had turned basic physics into weapons that could destroy advanced starships. Commander, Rita Walsh monitored the battle from her coordination center on the moon. The facility was officially a research station studying lunar geology. In reality, it was the command center for operations that spanned from Mercury to the edge of the solar system. Walsh watched as Admiral Nexus's fleet tried to regroup and retreat to a safe distance. The alien ships were powerful, but they were not designed to fight an enemy that could attack from any direction at any time. Their tactical doctrine assumed technological superiority would make conventional strategy irrelevant. But humans had learned long ago that technological advantage could be overcome by tactical innovation and superior knowledge of the battlefield. Every human military leader studied historical examples of superior forces defeated by inferior ones, who fought smarter rather than harder. The Karathi fleet found itself trapped in a solar system that had become a weapons platform. Every planet, moon, and asteroid was potentially hostile. Every piece of space debris could be a disguised weapon. The humans had turned their entire star system into a fortress without anyone noticing. Admiral Nexus tried to contact his high command to request reinforcements, but his faster-than-light communication array had been damaged by debris impacts. He was cut off from the Empire and facing an enemy that seemed to know exactly how to exploit every weakness in Karathi technology and tactics. As more of his ships took damage, Admiral Nexus began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. The galaxy's intelligence services had classified Earth as a low-threat world based on conventional analysis. But humans were not a conventional species. They had survived as the dominant life form on a planet that regularly tried to kill them. With ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and climate changes, they had developed technology while fighting constant wars with each other. They had learned to solve problems using whatever resources were available. Most importantly, they had learned that survival sometimes required making your enemy underestimate you until it was too late for them to adapt. The low threat rating had not been an intelligence failure. It had been exactly what humans wanted the galaxy to think. Admiral Nexus found himself in a position he had never experienced before. Half of his mighty fleet was either destroyed or badly damaged. The other half was trapped in a solar system that had become a death trap. His communications with the Empire were cut off, and his enemy seemed to know his every move before he made it. The final blow came when Dr. Kim's team activated their ultimate weapon. It was not really a weapon at all. It was a mining operation that had been running on a large asteroid for the past 2 years. Everyone thought it was extracting rare metals for Earth's growing technology industry. The truth was more clever than that. Paul Roberts and his crew had been placing charges throughout the asteroid using equipment designed for normal mining operations. But the charges were arranged in a very specific pattern, calculated by computers that had been running simulations for months. When the charges detonated, the asteroid broke apart in exactly the way Dr. Kim had predicted. Thousands of pieces spread out in a carefully planned pattern. Within hours, the debris field would make faster-than-light travel through the solar system impossible for anyone trying to leave. The broken asteroid created a maze of high-speed rocks and metal fragments. Any ship trying to jump to faster than light speed would be torn apart by collisions with debris moving in unpredictable patterns. The Karathi fleet was now trapped in the system until the debris settled or was cleared away. Admiral Nexus realized he faced a choice between slow death and negotiation. His ships were being picked off one by weapons he could not see or predict. His crew was losing confidence in their technological superiority. The primitive humans had made his advanced warships feel helpless and vulnerable. He sent a message to the human negotiation station. The tone was very different from his earlier communications. He requested immediate renewal of peace talks. He was willing to discuss terms that would be acceptable to both sides. The arrogant demands of conquest were quietly forgotten. Secretary Brooks received the Admiral's message while sitting in the same conference room where talks had broken down 2 days earlier. She was still accompanied by General Price, but now, Colonel Murphy and Dr. Martinez had joined the negotiation team. The humans were no longer pretending to be helpless primitives. Brooks welcomed Admiral Nexus back to the negotiation table with the same polite diplomatic language she had used before. But now her words carried the weight of demonstrated military capability. She expressed hope that both sides could reach an understanding that would benefit everyone involved. The Admiral returned to the station with a much larger security detail and a very different attitude. The meeting room that had seemed primitive and harmless 2 days ago now felt like enemy territory, Every human face seemed to be hiding dangerous knowledge and unexpected capabilities. The new negotiations began with Admiral Nexus asking a question that would have been unthinkable before the battle. What would it take for the humans to allow his remaining ships to leave the solar system safely? The roles had completely reversed since his first visit to the station. Secretary Brooks smiled, the same polite diplomatic smile she had used throughout the earlier talks. She explained that Earth was perfectly willing to establish peaceful relations with the Karathi Empire. However, humanity would not accept tributary status or foreign occupation under any circumstances. The humans presented their own terms for peaceful coexistence, trade agreements that benefited both sides, cultural exchange programs, joint scientific research projects, mutual defense agreements against common threats. Everything except the submission that Admiral Nexus had originally demanded. General Price added that Earth was prepared to share some of its defensive innovations with the Empire. Not the most advanced systems, but enough to help the Karathi defend their own worlds against future threats. It was a generous offer considering the circumstances. Admiral Nexus found himself in the uncomfortable position of accepting terms that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. But the alternative was losing the rest of his fleet to an enemy that seemed to understand Karathi weaknesses better than the Karathi understood them. While the negotiations continued, Admiral Nexus prepared his situation report for the Empire High Command. It would be the most difficult message he had ever sent. He would have to explain how a primitive species had destroyed half of his fleet using weapons made from mining equipment and space debris. His report would become one of the most important documents in galactic military history. He wrote that human military doctrine seemed to assume that advanced technology could always be defeated by superior tactics and better knowledge of local conditions. They had turned their entire star system into a weapon without anyone noticing. More importantly, he wrote that humans appeared to think differently from any other species the Empire had encountered. They did not surrender when faced with superior force. Instead, they became more creative and more dangerous. They treated technological disadvantage as a problem to be solved rather than a reason to give up. The Karathi High Command received Admiral Nexus's report with shock and disbelief. A species rated as 2.1 on the threat scale had destroyed a battle fleet using improvised weapons and basic physics. It challenged everything they thought they knew about galactic military power. Emergency sessions were called throughout the Empire. Military strategists studied every detail of the battle, trying to understand how their most advanced ships had been defeated by converted mining equipment. The analysis would take months and would change how the Empire approached every future military operation. Other galactic powers who had been monitoring the situation began quietly updating their own intelligence files. Earth's threat rating was immediately changed from 2.1 to 9.7 out of 10. Special notes were added warning that humans should be approached diplomatically rather than militarily. The Karathi Empire agreed to a mutual defense pact with Earth rather than risk further military losses. The treaty was signed aboard the same space station where Admiral Nexus had expected to dictate terms of surrender. Instead, he found himself agreeing to protect the world he had come to conquer. 6 months later, Commander Zix received a new assignment that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. He was appointed as the Karathi Empire's first ambassador to humanity. His job was to establish formal diplomatic relations with the species that had defeated their most powerful fleet. As Zix prepared for his new role, he studied the updated files on human history and culture. He began to understand why a species that had survived ice ages, mass extinctions, and world wars might react differently to alien contact than the galaxy had expected. The final entry in Earth's updated intelligence file was written by Dr. Brooks, who had been appointed as humanity's first ambassador to the galactic community. Her words were simple, but they captured something important about her species. She wrote that humanity's greatest strength had always been the ability to adapt, innovate, and survive against impossible odds. Humans looked forward to bringing these qualities to the galactic community as equal partners rather than conquered subjects. The galaxy was about to learn that some species earned their place among the stars, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the simple, refusal to surrender when faced with impossible challenges. Earth had been labeled as low threat because that was exactly what humans wanted their enemies to believe. Now the galaxy knew better. The blue-green world that spun peacefully in the darkness was home to creatures who could turn mining equipment into weapons of war and space debris into tools of victory. They were creatures who became more dangerous when cornered and more creative when challenged. Most importantly, they were creatures who understood that in a universe full of advanced civilizations, sometimes the greatest advantage was being underestimated by those who thought they knew everything about power and conquest.